Needing no introduction, Dr. Jamie Austin will again moderate this session, which will feature the report outs and discussions of the platforms and technology breakouts. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your box lunches. That was a box lunch, wasn't it? I just want to give you guys a heads up. You've seen Texas at its benign best, but we may have some violent weather this afternoon. There's a tornado watch out for Austin and points north. So we're subterranean here. If the AT&T Conference Center comes down, I've been told that it won't take more than 3 or 4 days to get down here to get us. It's all good. But just remember, if you're planning things out tonight, weather here can be interesting in many ways. So, okay, we're here for the breakout, second of 3 breakout session report outs. This one on platforms and technology, and we'll follow the same general pattern. Each of our esteemed breakout co-leads. This is the other set of 5 from this morning. Give us a few minutes, and then we'll talk about synergies and overlaps. And then we'll take some Q&A from the audience. So,
awesome.
And introduce yourselves briefly. So.
Yes. Hey, everybody. I'm Daniel Kleinman, founder and CEO of Seaworthy Collective based in Miami, Florida, and I'm a co-lead for Breakout Group C.
I'm Nick Rucker. I am the Chief Blue Tech Strategist for the MITRE Corporation, and I am the co-lead for Group, I don't even know what it is.
Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you're a co-lead. Hi, I'm Jill Zandy. I'm the President Executive Director of MATE Inspiration for Innovation, and I am a co-lead on Group E.
And I'm Adam Sewell. I'm from University of Rhode Island. I'm the Director of the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute and co-lead for Group A.
My name is Roxanne Beltran. I'm an assistant professor at UC Santa Cruz, and I am the co-leader of Breakout Group D.
Great. So we had a rousing white paper introduction to this. We heard some impassioned pleas for standardization and for, I don't know, democratizing, instrumenting the ocean. So tell us about what you heard in terms of synergies.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a couple key points. First is, are we even asking the right questions when we talk about, again, the public, right? I know we've already kind of discussed this a little bit, but as we think about especially forming these goals, who are the groups that we're actually looking, and communities we're looking to impact and building around those with a human-centered design, especially when it comes to technology, where we get very focused in on the data and not actually who it ends up impacting and what it's about. Other than that, there was also a need to say, how do we confront what the data will require us to do and build consensus among the public? And so what actually are those barriers to help, or how do we actually leverage technology to get over those barriers, I should say. And then beyond that, my group really also got to kind of the human element of getting back to some of the wonder we were discussing earlier, where how do we actually drive connection, empathy, and inspiration to the ocean, and really focusing on not only the technology, but the messaging behind it.
So yeah, we talked about a lot of those things as well, but one of our big focuses was really, how do we think about what that big push is in the technology space, in the maritime and undersea domain, right? So we focused a lot on NASA, and they're very good at getting billions of dollars for a telescope or a moon rover or Mars rover. But what is that big thing that we're trying to do in the maritime space that we can get the excitement of people so that we can start getting those type of funding with a B to develop these new platforms and capabilities for the next generation ocean exploration?
Jill, can I jump the line here?
You may. You may.
Well, our group talked about climate change as being one of the huge drivers for advances in technology and ocean observation and exploration, and that perhaps there's a need for ocean exploration to examine and refine its role in contributing to that mission. But our group thought that there were going to be massive investments in trying to understand and address the changing climate of the planet, and that the ocean obviously plays a huge role in that, and the technology efforts that we were talking about in the white papers, in the panel, and in our group should be part and parcel of trying to address that problem.
All right, back to me. Okay, so my co-lead, Millie Pitts, we started off like we did yesterday, just kind of getting folks to give their takes, right? Their immediate thoughts after hearing the panel. And so a lot of the things that I know have been talked about in other breakout sessions about who's going to pay for it, do this now, that sense of urgency that we heard, what can be done in the next year instead of, yes, it's important to look at 5 and 10, but what can we do now, the sense of urgency. And I think this was a comment in the panel that came up in our breakout session. Don't reinvent the wheel, use existing or potential future partnerships and collaborations to accomplish some things. And then we got into public engagement and impact. And I think some of the things that we talked about that resonated, and we talked a lot about it, is to make sure that you bring the communicators on board early. It kind of goes back to the online question that we had right before we broke about, the individual was about to launch something in New York State and was thinking, he should be doing some outreach. Well, bring those folks on, bring the outreach, the education people, the communicators of all different types, not just the science communicators, but maybe the professional marketing firms and professional communicators, so that we can make sure to reach a broad audience. Got my manual Padlet here. We also really talked a lot again about storytelling. I know that's been a theme around here, right? About telling the story and about how what makes the story really engaging and impactful are the characters in the story. And those tend to be, for the most part, the human characters, right? That make the story engaging and compelling. Now, there can be different types of characters in the story as well. Critters can be characters as long as there's a good storyteller. Another point, sorry, I'm going to keep going on here, is kind of touches upon bringing in the communicators early, but thinking about all the different stakeholders that could be engaged and involved. And I'm going to give this example. We talked a lot about this example of shipwrecks and the discovery of the Endurance, and thinking about how this very high profile expedition that was going to search for this historical ship, this well-known ship, in mounting this expedition, the folks pulled in scientists, they pulled in the outreach people, they pulled in the communicators and made them part of this expedition. They used the high profile to get the funding, to get the support, but then they thought about the other folks who should be involved and the other stakeholders who should be part of this. And then what was interesting from there is those stakeholders then pulled in their network of stakeholders. So it was like the old commercial, shampoo commercial, right? They told 2 friends and they told 2 friends, and suddenly this network, this community grew and became part of this expedition. And
But referencing Eric King's point, they got 21 million bucks from one donor.
right.
So some of the resource complexity that would normally attend a lot of the interactions you're talking about, it's a lot easier when somebody actually writes a big check.
Right. And that person wrote a big check because it was high profile, but all these other folks were pulled in. And then that touched upon this whole idea of dual purpose, right? And bringing people together, and the whole, again, back to the shipwreck idea. Set out to map a shipwreck, but what does that mean? Bring in the people who might map the area around it, right? And now suddenly you've got some funders who were focused on, again, high profile, the shipwreck, but you're pulling in the mappers and other people who can take part in that and benefit from it,
And that
funding.
shipwreck is under the International Antarctic Treaty. So they've got to be incredibly and completely non-invasive on exploring that wreck.
Right.
No souvenir hunting, no advertising locations. So-
Absolutely. Okay, sorry. There you go.
Roxanne.
Did you want to summarize more?
I had more to say, but I'll go ahead.
Well, you'll have time. You'll have time.
We talked about a lot of similar things as well. We talked about learning specifically what the public needs and sort of, I think, walking that tight line between giving the public the technology that they can use to explore themselves versus giving them the data and the insights gained from our exploration in order to help them understand, what it is that we're trying to do. We talked about bringing the we together and ensuring, for example, representation of stakeholders and communities. We talked about more efficient ways to work together and new ways to work together, from standardizing things to decentralizing things when possible, to creating creative funding arrangements to incentivize, for example, using the public view incentive to make sure that things are happening in the way that that makes the most sense for everyone. We talked about buy-in from all stakeholders, so that dual purpose thing came up a lot in our discussion as well. We need stakeholders to see the value, but we also need to understand their concerns and their hesitations with, for example, standardization and sharing and costs and all of that as well. One of the things that we talked about that I think has not been discussed yet is sort of collectively valuing non-traditional data sources. So things like animal-borne sensors, leveraging natural animal migrations to explore data, putting sensors on things like canoes or working with cruise ships or other vessels that are going to places anyways, that we can just ask kindly for them to turn on, the radar sensors that they already have the capabilities to be able to do, and to provide them in exchange, with something that is of value to them. Reimagining art and music for things like, communicating the science from the very earliest stages of science, but also in better understanding the data that are being explored. So those are some of the themes that we sort of came up with.
Yeah, and I'll just amplify some of the things that have been said. Our group was really enamored with the idea of millions of sensors out in the ocean. We kind of called it the giga sensor array. But in terms of dual use, I think we recognize that building the capabilities to create such an array is not an purely ocean exploration activity. These same sensors, as you said, could be used to engage with the public. One of the ideas we had was collaborating with a paddleboard manufacturer to make an instrumented paddleboard that automatically sends sensor data back to an archive. It may not be the most valuable data, but it helps people understand the value of collecting data in general. And in terms of dual use, the idea that these sensors would not just be for the deep ocean or ocean exploration, but the same sensors for coral reefs and wind farms and the like. And that is one of the reasons we spend a lot of time talking about processes of standardization, or the ultra sexy topic of standards. But I think we thought it could be really important. We engaged on the different areas that might be impactful, whether it's communication standards or power standards, or even the language, standardizing the language we use around ocean observations and exploration to help more people understand them. We also thought, this vision of millions of sensors is fantastic. What are the steps we can take along the way? And now I'm just going to refer to my notes. Just give me 1 second. And we had some of the similar ideas of cargo ships, other platforms that are out in the ocean that we could use, and not just putting them on there, but having the infrastructure that would allow that data to immediately become part of a collective data and be served to all the different stakeholders, the public, the science community, and the like, and that all of those are technologies that need to be built alongside a massive kind of influx of sensors to the ocean. One last thing of standardization, we did have the thought of what's going to happen to all these sensors once we put them out there. And so we wanted to think about standardizing the life cycle of sensors and how we make sure that we're being good stewards of the ocean that we're trying to understand as well.
Great.
Yeah, when we talked about millions of sensors and instrumenting all of the oceans, we really got hung up on the biodegradable piece. And, we don't want to just litter the ocean with all this batteries and technology and other things. So how do we, while we want to get all the fidelity we can and understand what's going on in a persistent way at scale, how do we do that in a sustainable way?
I just want to jump in also on a point Jill made earlier about interdisciplinarity. I think when we're talking about seeking out partners, especially for communication, again, it's a intentionality and follow through, especially when we're talking about creating tangible goals that can be measurable, right? What are these partnerships going to look like, and quantifying how many partnerships we're actually going to make going beyond the bubble of our world of either academia or industry. I know one of the things we also discussed was funding, and how, for example, there was an OER grant opportunity that was not made aware to a lot of us who are on the industry side, and how do we make sure that these opportunities are going through all of our communities and not just staying within silos. So that intentionality. And then the last piece is co-creation. I'm very, very bullish on that being a big word moving forward for our field, where when we talk about coming together for these opportunities, that co-creation is actually the central driver and not just the kind of additional benefit, because that's the products we're all going to create together, from the social impact side to the environmental and economic impact sides.
You know, I've been, this breakout's called Platforms and Technology. It's a little bit like education and outreach. And I think about that, and the historic view of ocean exploration, excuse me, has been a dedicated platform on which we port technology to do ocean exploration. Increasingly, we're at the point where we're going to be decoupling platforms from the technology we use. We'll have dedicated platforms, but we will have a lot of other technology that isn't dedicated to platforms, and we've hinted at that. Do you see that? It's happening now, but how do you see that divergence over the next 5 to 10 years? Do you think 5 and 10 years from now we'll be doing more technology-driven exploration without dedicated platforms, or not? I'm intrigued by that. Do you think about it?
I mean, I think if we want to throw it back to some of the content creation side, I mean, I'm definitely of the mind that a lot of people are going to be exploring the oceans from their living room on VR headsets. And especially as we talk about engaging the next generation, we have to lean into these emerging technologies that are literally use cases for so much of the data we're creating, not just VR, but also maybe NFTs and tokenomics and Web3, which it's a rabbit hole, but there's actually a lot of applications for us there. And so I think as we start to create this Internet of Things for the oceans and come up with more of these use cases beyond just research and actual applications that can help, ESG and help, actually quantify impact, which one of the biggest questions in impact investing is how do you measure impact? Some people literally sweat when they hear that question. These are all really important applications that we can explore as we really bridge silos.
Oh, come on.
I'll add something there. I think that that we're never going to know the questions that we want to answer 10 years from now, right now. And so the idea of decoupling the sensor technology from the platform technology is a really smart move, because we've spent a lot of time on the seabed, less time in the midwater, which I think Alan mentioned earlier. We don't want to have to invent new sensors to plug into a midwater vehicle. We want to be able to use them across all the platforms, especially the ones we haven't envisioned yet that are going to answer the questions that we haven't thought of yet. So we can take a lot of slack out of the system if we can standardize some of these sensor technologies to be more interoperable.
One of the things that we talked about building these platforms and these new technologies was, how do you take risks in a way that we're not doing? How do you accelerate the fail fast mentality and have the OE folks be the ones that are trying all these new technologies and getting them out the door quicker? It may fail, it may not work, it may not test or do what you want it to do. But at the end of the day, we've now kind of explored a new frontier and a new device that we wouldn't have done otherwise. And so it's really, how do we inject and change the incentives for the entire ecosystem to enable us to do those kinds of big bets and risk taking?
I'd love to jump off that real quick, because basically answer that question with a rhetorical question is, who's not in the room, right? And I'm not just talking about technologists, like we're talking about diverse communities. We're talking about diverse perspectives outside of academia. I know with someone in our group, we had a really great discussion where, the startup mentality and perspective of another way beyond academia or research or public sector, right, is not an opportunity that's even not, within the scope of much of the educational track, right? And so how are people exposed to these opportunities, or exposed to the opportunities to either do the work or find careers, right? And so just having kind of that awareness as we go about building these goals of saying, how can we actually include intentionally other stakeholders in the conversation, in the goals we're setting? Because I think a lot of us perpetuate a lot of these bubbles and silos without thinking.
Mm-hmm. And not just who's not in the room, but also which platforms or which technologies or which sensors are not yet in the room with us. Like Adam pointed out, I mean, the questions are evolving. The questions in 10 years are not going to be the questions that we're asking now, and that's a good thing. But also the platforms and the sensors that we're using now are not going to be the platforms and sensors that we're using in 10 years. And we can do our best to predict what we're going to be using in 10 years, but I think there's no way to do that with 100% certainty. So I think to your question, by decoupling the platform from the sensor, we can set ourselves up to leverage either new platforms or new sensors with existing platforms or sensors respectively, or we can leverage platforms that are already out there, like ships that have existing technologies that we want to, have carry a sensor or that we want to leverage in some other way that we just haven't thought of yet.
We're in for, excuse me, we're in for a big transition. I've been involved for about 20 years, and I'm a geologist, so I'm a fan of the seafloor because the geology's down there. The biology sits on the seafloor, and we have other interesting features. We have shipwrecks. We have most of the human-induced impacts on the oceans ends up at the bottom. It has broad appeal. The biology for some, shipwrecks for some, geology for some, industry for minerals and so on. But if we start making climate the driver, it's the water that matters more than the seafloor. Well, the water has fascinating biology. Some billionaires gave Woods Hole $35 million for something called the Ocean Twilight Zone Initiative. That is driving a huge amount of technology because you've got a lot of water to deal with. And looking at water with just plain old light can get remarkably boring. It's more boring than the abyssal plains. And Frank Cantelis told me once, he said, most of the seafloor is mud, featureless mud. And I said, yeah, but we're not going to sell ocean exploration by transiting ROVs across featureless mud most of the time. You look for the interesting things. Now, the Ocean Twilight Zone, biggest biological up and down every day on the planet. It's clearly important from a fisheries point of view. It's clearly important from a climate point of view, but the technology will be a driver, but in a totally different way than it has been. And I think that was alluded to in the white paper discussion this morning. And so comments on that. We're going to make a huge transition to mostly studying the water. And that let's
respectfully disagree. There's still a lot of great stuff on the seafloor when you think about carbon capture and sequestration.
No question.
I mean, I think we need to have the perspective of the whole ocean being important. And one of the things that we talked about in our group is, ocean exploration is a part of this discussion, that it does not benefit us to stay within the rules and realms of ocean exploration, that we all have to kind of do this together. And so your point is well taken, that we have to be making technological leaps that don't just help us on the seafloor, but help throughout the entire water column in order to we're not going to solve any of the problems that this planet is facing with just this group, right? So it has to be more than that.
And the video of the sail drone in a hurricane, in a force 4 hurricane, pretty interesting too. So we'll be studying the sea surface in ways we haven't been able to do it either.
Well, that's okay.
Other comments?
Well, I was going to say, I think that gets back to stakeholders, right? We talked about stakeholders and who else should be in this room and who else should be, right? You think creatively and differently. We all know we're talking to the choir here, preaching to the choir, but who else should be invited in? In our group, we talked some about risk management, right? So what about the insurance folks, the business folks who are going to make these decisions and are looking to us for good data and good information to help make good decisions? I love the example of what the Kingsford barbecue bricks, right? And how they were using NOAA data to make good business decisions. And so perhaps we need to invite them next time to help tell their story and see what else they might need from us.
I got one more leading question, and then we'll go to questions from you and our virtual audience. Lurking in the background of all this as a relevance point is the blue economy. How much money is being generated by and around the oceans by human society globally. Link the platforms and technology initiative with ongoing thinking about the blue economy. I'll give you all a chance to.
Well, this one's right in my wheelhouse. So, really, to me, what we see evolving in the blue economy, at Seaworthy say it's actually a regenerative blue economy going beyond sustainability. And what that really means is that we need to measure and verify all of the impacts, for example, for carbon dioxide removal of seaweed, that we need to create so that the oceans can recover, right? And as we start to think about these platforms and technology, and I think actually to the point of the last question too, a holistic view of how we interact with the ocean, not just one aspect, but we're an interconnected world, not only technologically speaking, but natural ecosystem speaking. And we have the opportunity to literally fix the greatest heat sink and carbon sink on the planet, and also source of biodiversity, which also stores carbon, right? That can help reverse climate change if we actually come together and collaborate and build things that can work together so that we can have all the knowledge, data, and really business opportunity, and seeing it as an opportunity, not just a problem. that I think is a really important philosophical shift.
Anybody else?
Yeah, one thing that we talked about in our group is that, the blue economy is going to be enormous, that market forces are going to drive a lot of this technology development, but that the role of government would allow us to kickstart that process, that to get ahead of the technology development, to be the pioneers of it, government funding can help move that forward and be prepared for the market forces that are going to come to bear later on.
And the Ocean Exploration Advisory Board had a blue economy subcommittee prepare a report, which I think is in the read aheads for this forum. Pretty interesting report that talks about degree of complexity when you deliver. I urge everybody to take a look at that because it bears on all aspects of what we're talking about. And the blue economy, other than climate will be a huge driver, but the blue economy will be the other one. The people that are looking to make a buck. And those people will ultimately be the people you're looking at to give the bucks are going to be linking the blue economy to everything that we're doing. So, whether they're cruise ship operators or tourism, harbors and canals, whatever it is, those people, the people that we're ultimately going to be looking at to partner with us to do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so let us transition to Q&A. Same drill as this morning. If you have a question in the audience, raise your hand, we'll get you a microphone, and then we'll alternate with our virtual attendees for the same. So, got one down here, Katie?
Testing. You guys can hear me right. Hi, Armand from Gulf Reach, co-director of youth engagement. So I'm interested, obviously we know that we need more innovation in technology and also utilizing the technology that we have to propel that forward as well. But we also have to think about the people operating those systems and the technical skills needed for that. So I'm interested in y'all's breakout sessions. Did y'all talk any about providing like the technical resources to train either young people or people, graduates, undergrads, to be able to operate these new technologies in spaces like that? Did you ever touch on anything like that in y'all's breakout sessions?
I don't think it came up, but I'm definitely right there with you on this one. What I will say is I think, as we especially talk about, especially the emerging blue economy, and all of us are, again, looking to support youth engagement and inclusion in this space. We need to think about what those accessible opportunities we can create are, including training. I know when I was coming out of college that there literally wasn't an accessible opportunity for me to do ocean exploration work. And I literally started my own company because I couldn't find one. So I think there is a lot to be said about, especially a lot of the good intentions I'm hearing about youth engagement in this space. And again, seeing accountability and action for that. So I know it doesn't answer the question because I haven't seen much of an answer myself, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Armand, obviously in our group, you were in our breakout session and brought up people, right? The importance of people. We're talking about the technology, but it's also, we have to remember the people needs and being able to pay for the people, right? And being able to educate the people. And I'd like to think that, programs like the one I run, the Global Made ROV competition, provide those opportunities, provide the inspiration, that engagement to get students involved and to get them to learn, develop the skill sets, and then apply them in a way that is tied into these issues. I mean, our theme for this year, I talked about that yesterday, UN Decade of the Ocean, MATE inspires ESG. The 3 focus areas have to do with marine renewable energy and the role that ROVs play in installation and maintenance of offshore wind turbines and offshore aquaculture and blue carbon in the form of seagrass beds. And of course, we have the Antarctic theme as well, but we tied in the whole climate piece. So we're one program. I know that there's others, and I think there's the more formal pathways, right? There's the degree programs and the universities and those more formal programs, but there's also informal programs like the one I run that can help students just get inspired, build the skills, and apply them to addressing the issues that we're facing.
And also, just to throw it back to something that actually came up in the breakouts yesterday, which is basically, we offer internship opportunities at many of our organizations, but how many actually result in young professionals getting long-term employment? So.
Yeah, I want to add, first of all, thank you for always asking the first question. Really helps break the ice. So I appreciate that.
Adam worries about this kind of.
One of the things we're doing in the Ocean Exploration Cooperative Institute is trying out or piloting an internship program aimed at students seeking associate's degrees. Because we often think of these pathways into ocean science as being pretty rigid, or the ones that we have gone through. And there's a lot of young people who can't go for a 10-week internship somewhere because they have a job and they have family obligations. And so I think we need to spread out the opportunities for kind of pathways into the blue economy jobs to a more diverse group, and not just racial, ethnic, and gender diversity, but socioeconomic diversity as well. And another aspect, there's a lot that falls out from this huge array of sensors, and it's not just the people to run it, but the massive amount of data that is going to come in. We have to be really thoughtful about how we approach this to make sure that that all aspects of it are addressed.
Anybody else? We are in transition. The one good thing about where we are in the world right now is that students are more informed than their professors about opportunities. And the Jackson School, my school, one of the biggest geoscience efforts in the world. It's historically been an oil and gas place. You're in Texas, it's where the jobs are. It's changing. There will always be some jobs in the extractive industries, but we have students now that are helping us redefine our curriculum because they know where the opportunities are going to be. And it's going to be in a lot of these new fields. And so it's reverse engineering, right? The young people are telling the senior people, come on, it's not all about oil and gas anymore. I've been involved in this place for over 40 years. And it's a good thing for us too. So I think it'll be one case where the young people are helping us transition. I really do. Do we have a virtual? Yes, no. So how about another one from the audience here? Come on.
Not all at once.
Nothing on platforms and technology? You guys have got to be kidding. The box lunches were too big?
There you go, we got one.
I feel like the elephant, or maybe it's the whale shark in the room. All the conversations that I've been involved with, and even the show that I do is involved with, this climate. Lots and lots of information, but I'm not hearing any simple answers or ideas about how technology, or maybe it's communication, can get that message that keeps gaining momentum and losing momentum. How can we keep that momentum going and make it stronger?
Yes, I can jump in. Because this actually kind of came up in our group too. We said, how do people get the sense of urgency, right, or come to consensus? And I think this does get back to a communication issue. Actually, the other piece of what we talked about was human-centered design, and basically not just building technology for data, but actually building it around how do we actually create data that means something to people, especially the public, which I know we need to do a better job of defining. But I do think not only is it storytelling, but I think it comes back to how we even include stakeholders, right, in designing our products. And I think, and also to what I said earlier, it's not about everyone gets caught up in the size of the problem, and a lot of our communication and data is literally quantifying the problem, but it's also quantifying the opportunity, right? I mean, ESG is one of the greatest financial opportunities of our time if we can actually financially incentivize taking on climate change, right? No bigger problem in our lifetime we're gonna have to solve than that. Why aren't we focusing on that rather than gloom and doom?
Anybody else out there?
I was going to say, I think that came out somewhere in maybe it was our breakout session today, or discussions about, having not the gloom and doom, right, but the more inspirational, positive, you could make a difference. And I think, Adam, what you do, and we talked about that yesterday, simplifying the message, right, and making it available and understandable to a wider audience. I mean, you play a critical role in this and getting the message out.
Well, the UN has played a vital role in the IPCC reports, and they're zeroing in on quantifying the threat that a changing planet has for humans. I think science now has a task in front of it to be part of the mitigation, living with the risks part of the equation, and ocean exploration and related could be that. We reawaken the positiveness about the ocean, the wonder, the awe, the systems interconnectedness, the ecosystems interconnectedness, and it touches on a lot of important market issues like fisheries.
Well, and this brings up actually one other thing that happened in our group, and that's kind of I think another point of communication, right? SpaceX has been an example that I think came up across a lot of our groups, and it's really like, what's the sexy startup in the ocean space, right? I mean, I'm in Miami, that's our thing, but like, it's very much, we need to have this, not only like wonderment, but like actual cool factor that is especially inspiring my generation to say like, this is work I really want to do. And why are we so unaware of the opportunity? We're not marketing it well, we're not communicating it well. Part of why we don't have a lot of representation here is because obviously we don't understand the opportunity, right? And how do we make sure that that information, that value is getting communicated and reaching the people that literally are bearing the brunt of the impacts that we're working to fix? It's just a really critical point of, when we get back to the communication component of this, of really explaining the value of the opportunity.
Cousteau in the 70s, I met him in the hall once at Woods Hole. He was about that tall. The most diminutive man you've ever seen in person, but he was huge because he could make the oceans live for people. And he was using a communications vehicle that was pretty new in those days, television and related. He used it, and he sold his technology. He didn't just sell, he sold the Calypso, he sold the Aqualung, he sold what he was doing with that technology to make people just believe that there was an inner space out there that was worth seeing. 50 years later, I'm still overwhelmed by what we don't know. We just have to reacquaint ourselves with how important those stories are. We have better technology. We have more inclusive technology. We have incredible windows on these environments. I just don't think we're telling the stories that well. And this was one guy and his team doing that. Other questions?
Can I add one more thing to that?
Sure.
I think it's really important that we cast the ocean as an ally in our, need to address all sorts of challenges that the planet faces. I mean, as Daniel mentioned it, the capacity to sequester carbon in the ocean is enormous, much more than we need if we can figure out how to do it and how it's going to supply food for us. We just hear a lot about how this thing is under threat and this is at a tipping point, but we could really look at the ocean as our ally, and I think that might be an effective message.
Yeah, and I'll add one last piece. Excitement / hype, honestly, right? Like, I mean, they're all on the spectrum, but I do think that, for my team, especially getting a lot of people from diverse backgrounds into the blue tech space that never were in it before, what we really see is this opportunity to actually create excitement again around this opportunity, like carbon dioxide removal, where we're actually moving the needle on climate change, even at small levels.
I mean, there was excitement back when I was a student about the oceans, but it wasn't clear there was much in the way of jobs.
Mhm.
Unless you wanted to be an academic, and a lot of us went and got PhDs because if you were interested in the oceans, other than going to be a hobbyist or a yachtsman, you had to get a PhD, and then you hope to get a university job. I have never seen a greener pasture for jobs related to the oceans than are out there right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's an incredible opportunity for young people. One more question, and then we'll move on. Come on, guys, women, people, him, her,
Over here.
his. Beware of the other co-lead asking a question.
No, I just wanted to see if we could add that to the, maybe the list, right, is looking at even partnership with the workforce development community. I know we work with them. They know what kind of needs to be done, but they also need to be informed of what these jobs are going to look like, what, feeding into that, because they're working directly with those folks. I know we work a lot with community colleges, non-traditional students that are, getting out of a certain job but really need the skills for that. What are these jobs going to be in the tech? What are the skills are going to be and defining that. So yes, we're doing the technology, we're building the technology, developing data acquisition, but what is it going to be and how is it going to be distributed to the folks that, again, traditionally have not been in those positions. So we know that certain people will get access to these jobs, but at the same time, we need to make sure that if we're truly wanting to diversify the workforce, then that's going to have to be how we work together to make sure that the information is getting out. So it's more of a comment, but.
Go ahead. Anybody?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, also I work a lot in workforce development. So, it's interesting because one of the things that you just made, light bulb go off in my head is I'm just curious, how many people are actually working with like city and county level stakeholders that are actually doing the general public interfacing. I think one of the pieces when we talk about interfacing with the public is that are we the ones doing that? Or should we work with the entities and the people and the stakeholders that are already doing that work and can save us a lot of hard groundwork and grassroots work, right? Where there's literally a workforce development, director at Miami-Dade County that I'm working with, right? And that they want to support our work. And so if we can actually, and I think this really just gets back to the need for partnerships, find those people that can help us create those connections rather than us think we have to do it all ourselves. I think it's a really big point.
And then make it relational, not transactional.
Yes.
I mean, it's got to be a continuous effort. I think we've failed in that generally. We see an opportunity, we take advantage of it, and we move on. I think these relationships have got to evolve and continue, and it's based on trust. It's based on other things. Any other questions?
Jamie, just a comment to continue the conversation around workforce development. I mean, I mentioned yesterday the ATE program at NSF that funded us, that funded the MATE Center that evolved into MATE Inspiration for Innovation. It's all about workforce development and the role that community colleges play in it. And so I think it's interesting because when we first started, 23, 24 years ago, and looking at, for example, the Department of Labor and looking at their databases, you couldn't find things like ROV pilot or technician in there. And I'm not sure they're in there now. So that was a bit of an uphill battle, because if you're looking at schools, community colleges, and others who want to develop programs and they've got to reference Department of Labor databases and that job's not in there, then they can't justify the funding to develop the program. So one of the pivots that we did over time was to approach programs where students are developing the skill sets that can be applied in our ocean world. We started looking at electrical technology programs and engineering technology programs. And one of our longtime partners at Long Beach City College, I mean, he's been working with us forever. And his program was really pushing students into industrial technology. But when we gave him this idea to put an ocean theme and ocean problems and ocean activities like our ROV competition, he was able to show his students the different applications for the skill sets. And that opened up this world of job and career opportunities for them. So I think it goes back to maybe thinking differently and more creatively about how to get the word out too about these job opportunities. You don't always have to go to ocean engineering programs or try to, hit some of these other groups that focus on ocean, but you can look at related programs and related skill sets. And even with our competition, I mean, we have examples of Copiah Lincoln Community College in Mississippi. They have engineering technology, a vocational technology program there where most of the students who participate in the team come from. But when we started putting out this business sense, right, we challenge the students who participate to transform their teams into companies, think of themselves as startup companies. You got to have a CFO who's going to manage your budget. They reached out to their accounting business program and pulled somebody in. And okay, maybe that person won't go to work as a CFO at some ocean-related technology firm, but at least that person has a better appreciation for ocean issues and opportunities in the ocean field if they wanted to go into that. But again, if not, at least they have this appreciation of this experience that there is an ocean out there. It's important. In addition to job opportunities, there's problems that need to be solved. And if a vote comes around, he or she will have an appreciation and support the legislation to get us funding to keep doing what we're doing and expand upon it.
Well, we're about out of time. Give our second round of breakout leads a hand. And save up your energy because within a couple of hours, we're going to have another breakout. And we'll have some mix and match of the 10. There may not be the same team up here. It'll be a mix, but you'll get a chance to see this group or some subset of it again. Thank you very much.